like button because it helps out the algorithms for future videos. Also, check us out on Twitch, Twitter, Apple, Spotify. I think I caught everything else. And like to thank our producers, 216 The Net, for producing this. Kent Jones, and then also Tim Stewart.
Roger, That Chronicles is happy to introduce Army veteran Mathias Carter and author of a children's book describing PTSD, who's going to tell us about the Rush Road Home program.
Good morning, everybody.
How you doing, Mathias?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. It's totally awesome.
Oh,
Fantastic. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you? First off, you're in the U.S. Army. What made you join the military?
So I joined before 9/11. So my grandpa was in the Navy, and then he learned, and then he went to the Army. And so he was in for 18 years. My father joined the Army. My sister joined the Army. She was a military police investigator. So, I mean, it was kind of just something we did. I wasn't ready for high school. I think I did the delayed entry program sophomore year. I knew I wanted to get in. I joined 1 month before 9/11 happened. So definitely a little different. I didn't know, but my dad kind of told me every 10 years we get into something. So I wasn't naive. I figured something was going to happen, but definitely not what happened, But I was at Fort Knox when 9/11 happened. But yeah, that's why I joined. I wasn't ready for college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I figured I'd figure it out in the military.
You ended up getting your college though, didn't you?
I did, but I didn't figure out what I wanted to do while I was in the military. Then I went to college and still didn't know what I wanted to do during college.
So when you grow up, what do you really want to be?
No, it took a long time. I feel like that's one of the things that I was actually talking to my team about this morning is when you get out of the service, they don't tell you that you just lose purpose. From one day you have purpose, the next day you don't. So it took a long time to find what my purpose was. So now I help veterans out. And before I helped vets out, I was a VP at a bank. And I hated it. So now I actually love what I do and give back. So
what did you do in the military?
I was a multi-channel transmission systems operator. So basically I dug holes. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I provided communication for infantry to call backup. So I was attached when I went to Iraq in 2003. I was attached to 3rd ID. And then later on in that year, I was attached to 101st. And they dropped me off on top of a mountain. I was a part of something called the remote access unit. So we had to do our own security, our own everything. So I was one of those guys that grew my beard out. I had Corona pants and a Hulk t-shirt and my machine gun on the front and a grenade launcher in the back. And anytime we saw the helicopters coming, we had about 20 minutes to shave and put our uniform on before the generals got off the helicopter.
Dry shaving with the big old beard and all that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, good times.
Fantastic. Sound like you had a good career.
I liked it. I mean, it's kind of weird when it was my time to get out of being over in Iraq. That was when stop loss happened. And
right.
It's weird thinking back at it that I was trying to stay because the rest of my team was there, but only 4 of us still got through somehow from stop loss, and we were sent to different locations. But we tried to stay there, which is weird. I mean, you guys can understand, but a lot of civilians don't understand that there was a time where I was trying to stay in war and not go home because my friends were there,
Well, that's because you're your family.
Yeah.
You don't want to let your family down.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead.
How long were you in the military for?
4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, just 4. I got hurt over there. Had a TBI, and then I was going to get medically discharged when I got back to Fort Hood, but that's a whole story. And I didn't have any guidance back then. I didn't really know anything about VSOs or anybody that could actually steer me in the right direction. So I was given the option to get medically retired or just deal with the VA. And I was like, you know what? I'll just deal with the VA. Mm-hmm. And that was it's one of those things that I teach other people to do your homework.
Well, that's the biggest thing that you brought up a couple of times already is that the transition. The one thing is, because I used to do veterans employment, is that the Department of Defense and the VA and the Department of Labor, let alone your own home state, are very disconnected for the transition part. If you think about everything you learned right now if you had known that as you started getting out, how you would make different decisions.
Yeah, there's so many different things that I mean, obviously hindsight's 2020, right? And I think financial literacy is something that they should probably help out a little more, especially while you're in, because you're young, you're stupid, you're given money, you don't have to pay rent or for food or any of that stuff, and you just blow it. I remember it would be a 4-day weekend. We get paid on a Thursday, and I'd be broke by the time I was supposed to be paid. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember coming back from deployment twice, and you get the hazard pay, duty pay, all that good stuff, and came back from Afghanistan the first time with like 15, 16 grand in my account. So like we're in a layover. I forgot what country it was, like Kyrgyzstan or something like that, and or Turkmenistan, one of the Ks or one of the stands. Put my debit card in the ATM. It's like, oh, $15,000. Shit, what do I do with this? So I was drinking, definitely going out to the bars, and then buying guitars and Marshall half stacks, which were like 2-3 grand, and like 3 months later, all gone. So, but now a lot more financially responsible. And that's what they should be teaching pretty much right at the get-go, like boot camp, where have financial maturity. Don't just be like, oh my God, I got this amount of money, let me go blow it.
Can you imagine trying to teach a young fella financial responsibility?
Right. Well, when you're in boot camp,
it ain't gonna happen.
Well, you could plant the seed, though, is the thing. And when you're in boot camp, you're like, drone soldiers, hey, shut the F up, you listen to shit, instill the fear of God. Like, if you lose this money, like, just come up with some wild ass stories and stuff. It may not be true, but plant that seed into there because it'll save you a lot of heartache.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in Fort Hood, one of the soldiers I was in charge of, I told him my stories because, like you said, when you get back, you have a huge amount of money. When I got back, nobody even picked us up from the airport. I was in Germany. Nobody picked us up. I had to get my way back to Darmstadt, which is where I was. And like I said, my whole unit was still in Iraq. So when I came back and there were just like, it was a skeleton crew there. They said they didn't even know where I was supposed to stay. They basically said, hey, they told a 20-year-old that just turned 20. They said, come back in 2 weeks. So I had back then a lot of us had drinking problems, and so I woke up in France. I woke up in Amsterdam because you can just hop on the train, drink on the train, and then you wake up in a different country.
Oh, wow.
So I scared the hell out of my parents numerous times, calling them in the middle of the night because I was in a country I didn't know where I was. It was, just to do that kind of stuff was crazy. So I would share that story and how I blew, $15,000 in a couple weeks. With my soldiers, and so a lot of them actually they're doing really well now financially. So they said because of my stories, they didn't want to make the same mistake.
Well,
so.
it sounds like it was pretty exciting. Wake up and you're in a country where it's like
If I didn't have pictures, I wouldn't believe it. I wouldn't believe that I was at these places. So
we're in a world with Mathias.
Horrible.
So you mentioned you had a TBI. How did that happen?
So the first TBI,
First one.
Yeah, I had two. Yeah, the first one, right when we crossed over. I mean, it's kind of weird because when I try to get help with the VA, I was doing it myself. I never worked with a VSO. So the way it's worded is they want you to, talk about basically what bothers you. So I'm like, I don't know, 15 pages in, and I'm like, I'm writing a memoir. This is killing me. And but most of it was from the first day or so. So it was like obviously the first day crossing over was very busy. And so when we finally stopped, we kind of stopped at the top of, I don't know what you consider it, kind of like a mound, where it kind of sloped down, and there was a city out in the distance, and they wanted us to get so close, and there was thousands of trucks in this convoy. The Marines obviously are in the front, then third ID and all that stuff. And, I'm probably toward the front of the middle section of thousands of trucks. And they're trying to fit all these trucks on this mound for some reason. And, they're like, get closer. And something told me not to. And I'm like, hey, I don't want to get any closer, because then you can't leave.
Right.
And my dad taught me that a long time ago because my first car was a 73 Ford LTD. He taught me to always leave space because you never know if the car in front of you is going to break down.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. So I would not get any closer, and they would just gave up on me, went to the car behind and got them to get real close to me. Well, I fell asleep, and right in the beginning, we didn't have any sort of up armor. It was all vinyl. So my head's resting on the vinyl window, and first mortar comes in, and it was at that point the loudest noise I ever heard. And but it was still kind of a little far away. So something told me to jump out of the truck. And so I jumped out of the truck. The next one landed like close enough to throw me into the truck head first. And I had a signal corps truck. So the back part was a metal shell. And so I almost tipped it over with my head, and a piece of shrapnel went right through where my head would have been if I stayed in the truck. And so that was the first TBI, was basically trying to tip over a truck on my head. So
You're a pretty tough guy.
it was weird because now learning all this stuff, back then I mean up until probably last year I wouldn't admit that I was scared, but now I know it was I was scared.
Shock, yeah.
Yeah, and everyone has that fight or flight or freeze, and luckily, and for my life, it's always fight, but yeah, I saw freeze everywhere. You see people that you looked up to that are in the fetal position, hiding behind tires and stuff. And, I was able to continue to move and stuff like that. And so I ran to the other side of the truck. And it's funny because I always tell these stories about how we were ill prepared. We didn't have any masks. We didn't have any eyewear. We had one pair of NVGs per two people,
Wow.
so we're looking, it was dark out. So, I was the TC. I was the passenger, and so I get the driver's NVGs, and I look through them, and there's a tank pointed at us from far away, and I'm like, holy shit, So we jump in the truck and we take off, and we were the only ones that could leave because we had enough space, and we just drove. He's like, where do you want to go? And I'm just like, I can't talk because I think my heart was like in my throat, and so we just kept going and going and going, and then we finally stopped where the artillery was. I felt like that was a safe place to stop. And we stopped behind some tanks, and the tankers, they're just crazy. They're laying out there, no gear on, just laying in the sand, not even paying attention. So we told whoever was in charge at that point what was happening back there at the back, like the middle of the convoy, and so they called in. They had everyone jump in, and they obliterated this city. And they had me man the radio. And so my first sergeant was actually calling in, and I was the one taking it, and that threw him off because he was like, what the hell are you doing on the phone, and all that stuff. And it was pretty funny. But that fight, flight, or freeze, there was somebody that was driving a deuce and a half that froze, and they had to pull him out of the truck in order to move it because they were all sitting ducks, and things were coming in. So
when you're talking about the fight, fight, or freeze thing, I used to be a use of force instructor for a police department, and whenever instructors talk about use of force, they would talk about the fight or flight syndrome, and then train the people to try to overcome the flight side of it and engage. And but one thing that they rarely, matter of fact, I've never even heard one talk about was the freeze aspect of it. And I saw that quite a few times in my career as a police officer.
Yeah.
Just simple freeze, and just like you're stunned. It's like a mental stun, and they don't know what to do. And in fact, I remember it happening to me at one point. And so anyway, just no one likes to talk about that. But as highly trained as I was, as capable as I was, just like everybody else, you do have those situations that are beyond your immediate life experience.
Yeah.
And that's the time when you're probably going to stall in that decision-making process. So, it's not unusual. It's part of the three elements, and it's one of the three is going to happen, and you got to deal with it. You got to manage it.
it's definitely interesting. It was funny because we had a small female vet that nobody wanted to be on duty with, like for guard, because every time when she learned how to shoot a saw, the squad automatic weapon, every time she shot it, she would close her eyes. And so everyone was freaking out. They were like, I don't want to be on duty with her. And so they put her on duty with like the tallest, biggest guy that we had there. And one of the first times that we had gunfire come in, her eyes were wide open, shooting back, and he was the one that was hiding. So it's, you never know, like you said, never know how your body's going to react. So
there's a lot of from experience where you mentioned you get some of the guys that you look up to and stuff, and they're all hardcore, and then when the shit hits the fan, they're like, "Oh my god, what do I do?" You know, they're like kind of. We had one guy, I'm not going to mention his name, but yeah, Rick.
How did I get involved in this?
You served with me back in the day too, so no,
in his dreams.
but yeah, like he was all hardcore and stuff. Remember when I was a boot, I got to my, he was all hardcore, like, oh yeah, you know, blah blah blah, training this, that, and all the other. And then when our squad got into a firefight over in a town called Dowwood Shaw, it was like in the Cornwall Valley area, so like right on the outskirts and stuff. It was just a crappy position to be in. So we're doing our thing and all that stuff, and then I find out back in the rear, he was like requesting not to go on any more missions. He's talking to his team leader, and his team leader's calling him a bitch and all that stuff. I'm like, wow, him, really? No kidding. So yeah, it's pretty interesting how, you know, you can put that front on for a while, and then when the shit hits the fan, it's like, you know what, there's no shame in being scared of being shot at, because it's not a normal thing whatsoever. And you know how we're trained, it's like, you know, you get the fight, flight, or freeze. You know, if you're gonna freeze, like how I was trained, it's like stop, get some cover, freeze for a hot second there, assess your situation of what's going on, because you don't want to be like the girl closing her eyes, you know, spraying and praying. But with her, when the shit actually hit the fan, like her motor instincts were spot on. Like, you know, you won't know what you'll do, but you know, 9 times out of 10, people are like, I don't know if I'll pull the trigger. It's like, oh, you will if somebody's being shooting at you, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And I have no grievances whatsoever for shooting at whatever it is and all that stuff, because either it's them or me, and your survival instincts kick in. But yeah, nothing wrong with freezing as long as you're not sitting out there in an open duck, like an open duck. But also, you know, don't be hesitating too long to where, you know, people have to like move around. But anyway, you know, situation dictates. But I kind of held that for a while, you know, when I got when I was getting shot at and stuff. It's like, well, it froze. Like, well, what were you trying to do? Stop, freeze, assess your situation, then go for it. I'm like, okay, so yeah, okay, that makes complete sense. So,
you know, I remember a fellow officer I worked with. I won't mention his name just in case he's listening to this. But you know what happened? He had a drunk driver, and he was trying to take the guy into custody, and he was on the other side of town. The fellow he was trying to take into custody said, "I'm not going to go," and he was a tough son of a gun. So he called for a backup. I went right across town. I was doing 100 miles an hour getting there. So I finally get in, pulled up in the back of this place, and he's talking to this dude, and this dude's like, I'm not going. So I got out of the car nonchalantly and walked over and just listening at first. And then the guy's, I'm not going. So I almost mentioned his name, took him by the arm. And when he did, the guy grabbed him. Now, this fellow that I was with, this fellow officer, was a tough son of a gun. He was a tough kid. We went to the police academy together, and he was strong. He was a good wrestler and everything else. Next thing you know, he's laying on the ground, face first. And so I went after this guy. I was in the air. He threw me. I landed on the ground. I bounced right back up on my feet. And I walked and I went back over. And on my way over, I was watching my buddy get knocked down on the ground again. And I grabbed this guy, and he threw me on the ground. And I went, and then I got up and I went, oh, the Marine came out of me at that point. And I saw my buddy hit the deck third time, and I walked right over, and this guy reached for me, and I slapped his hands out of the way, and I grabbed him by the head, spun him around, and put him in a lateral vascular neck restraint, they call it. And I, lack of better terms, rendered him unconscious. And I just did my thing, and he went to sleep. And when as we're down on the ground, I looked at my buddy, and I said, put the cuffs on him. And he reached over, and he just took this guy's, he was like this. And I said, if you don't put the cuffs on him, I'd put the cuffs on you. And he went, oh, snapped him right out of it. Fast forward 10 years, he and I are in another situation where another guy had just raped this girl with the spike things, 16 stitches across her face. He was supposed to have been armed, and two guys were already on him. And these guys are 250 pounds of just pure muscle, and on this one guy. This guy's lifted him off the ground and everything else. And I walked over with my steel-toe boots, and I kicked him right in the groin. Wham! And all that did was made him mad. And I went, my eyes were big around as saucers. And I went, okay, well, the fight is on. So we're wrestling. And finally we get him down on the ground and they get him in a position and they're yelling at me, put the cuffs on him. And I did the same thing. And my buddy that I said that to about 10 years ago, he said, you put the cuffs on, right? Put the cuffs on. Okay, click, click.
Karma.
You know, but that's that freeze element.
Yeah.
That has, you know, and you don't know when it's going to happen. And you can be the toughest thing on the planet. And given the appropriate circumstances, you can actually freeze or get an adrenaline dump that causes weakness.
Well,
And it's just amazing.
let's tell us about the Road Home program.
Yeah, so the Road Home program is a nonprofit through Rush University Medical Center in Chicago.
You said Rush?
Yeah, Rush University Medical Center in Chicago. And they help active duty, National Guard, reservists, as well as veterans and their families with the invisible wounds of war. So they help with anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. They also help with military sexual trauma. And they do it at no cost. They do it for any era and any discharge status. So, I mean, it's a lot of information, but definitely those are the two things to remember. So if anybody out there has any brothers or sisters in arms that are hurting from mental health, any era, any discharge status, anywhere in the world, we'll fly them out to Chicago for a 2-week intensive outpatient program. What I like to say is, you know, if you compare to working out, you know, normal outpatient treatment is like, let's say once a week, right? So that's like working out once a week. I don't know if you'll ever see results if you only work out once a week, right? But if you do, let's say it might take 5 or 6 years or something like that if you work out once a week. But if you go to basic training, it's going to suck, but it's going to show you fast results and you're going to love yourself after you're done. That's what this is. It's a 2-week intensive outpatient program. So it's 10 days, but it has about 6 months to a year's worth of mental health in 10 days. So you're doing individual, you're doing group therapy, you're doing mindfulness, which for me, I'm not dumb. I always call myself a dumb soldier, but I'm not dumb. But I walked in there and I said, you know, I heard the word mindfulness, but what is it, right? And she explained it to me in the way that a lot of vets care a lot about other people, but they don't care too much about themselves. And I was like, holy shit, I'm not alone, you know. And so as a man, as a father, as a veteran, those are all groups that care a lot about other people and not too much about yourself. So mindfulness is something that's extremely important, but it's hard to get a grasp on. And when I tell my story a little later, I'll explain why now I'm a little more mindful. But mindfulness, they do yoga. Seeing Vietnam vets do yoga and being very, very, you know, standoffish with trying yoga, but then after they try it, they actually like it and it helps. Yoga, art therapy. Art therapy is probably one of the main reasons why I love working there. You know, when I started working there, I walked into the art therapy room. And what they do is they give the service members that come into the program a plaster mask. And on the outside, they want you to depict how you think society sees you. And then on the inside, how you see yourself. And I've never walked into a room and felt like where I wasn't alone so much. So is that room. It's like walking into Hallmark and every card you pick up is exactly how you feel inside. It was impactful. I lost it in that room. And that's one of the main reasons why I love what they do. The clinicians are amazing, but I really think their art therapy program is beautiful. And they actually have a traveling art like the traveling mask exhibit. So they give the service members the option to, you know, destroy the mask, keep it, donate it, whatever you want to do. And a lot of them donate it back and they do a little write-up on what they were thinking when they did this. And then we had them professionally framed. And we just finished up in Loyola, and it's going over to different colleges so that non-vets or veterans, you know, civilians can get a better, I guess, example of what goes through our minds, because it's hard to explain it. You know, you need that outlet. Besides the art therapy, we also do acupuncture. We help with sleep hygiene, which a lot of us have issues with sleeping. And then also we have a chaplain on staff who is ex-special forces, amazing man. And for me, coming back, moral injury was probably one of the hardest things, you know, especially growing up Catholic, we kind of corner the market on guilt, and so coming back and that moral injury aspect was pretty hard. So having a chaplain on staff that can help get you to help forgive yourself and move past that as well is amazing.
The other thing you might want to bring up that a lot of people aren't aware of is the spouse's participation in the program.
Yeah, so the second week of the intensive outpatient program, they do have some opportunities for your family member. And obviously in the military, family is a very loose term, but whoever is there to be your support has the availability to come up and kind of get a little bit of psychoeducation to see, kind of hear about what you're going through and how to better support you and things like that. But yeah, it's an amazing program. And then even if somebody, a lot of people, when they try to get help, all these barriers start to come up. And even if they didn't reach out and ask for help, the closer you get to getting that help, the more barriers show up. So when people say that, hey, I can't get away from work for 2 weeks, I have bills to pay, I've got a mortgage. We work with organizations like Salute Inc. and things like that in order to pay your mortgage and pay your bills while you get help. So there's really no downside to getting help.
So in effect, if somebody can't afford to go, he's out in California.
They don't need to have a dime in their pocket. They don't have to have insurance. They don't have to have a dime in their pocket. They don't have to be connected through the VA. To be honest, they don't even need to have a diagnosis when they call in. Our intake team will work with them on that. So anybody that's struggling with anything mental health, if they ever served a day in the military, and we have 2 different cohorts. One is, we call it combat, but stateside accidents, even hazing and basic training, or, we all know, but a lot of civilians don't, or maybe they do because of movies, but, just the sheer act of breaking you down to build you back up, it can affect people for life. And those are things that we put in our combat cohort as well. But then we also have a military sexual trauma cohort that helps as well.
That's fantastic. That's
So
a very holistic approach.
Now, they got started with the Wounded Warrior program. Are they still providing funds?
Yeah, so we're one of 4 academic medical centers in something that is called the Warrior Care Network. So Wounded Warrior Project has put over $250 million into mental health care. And so they found organizations that are doing amazing things, and then they help with funding. But the reason why we can help pre 9/11 as well is because we are philanthropically funded. So other organizations like Boot Campaign and things like that help pay for pre 9/11. But there are 4 academic medical centers throughout the U.S. One is called Home Base in Boston. We have one in Atlanta. We have one in UCLA called Operation Mend, which helps more with moderate to TBIs, where you have issues with your normal everyday living things. And then also like facial deformities or something that happened from a bomb.
Got a question up on the board.
We have a question on the board. All right. This is from Kent Jones. How does the Road Home program help the rest of the family? And they may have been living with the vet for several years. So there is a program. Is there a program for them so they can continue to support this journey?
So the Road Home program does a lot of different things for the family members. So just an example, I have a friend whose girlfriend, they live together, and she once asked me if she would be able to get help. And yes, the answer is yes. So even if the service member isn't ready to get help, isn't ready to talk, the family member can call and either get help to better, I guess, understand what they're going through, or get help themselves. I mean, I think we all know that we're pretty hard to get along with sometimes. I think a lot of us. And so it takes a toll on your family. And we've seen that it takes a toll on your family, your kids, stuff like that. So we help with couples counseling, marriage counseling, children's counseling, or the family member can just get help for themselves. So.
Yeah. And the biggest thing is, when you're talking about it, like one of the things I found with when we had the unemployment got really crappy around 2010 is the Vietnam vets. Nobody wants to ask for help because we're all macho. We can do it, whether you're male or female. We're going to tell us take the hill. We're going to move it. But in our generation that we have now, maybe doing the same thing as the Vietnam vets is that when they got out, they got a job, they went to school, they got all this stuff done, they got sports, they got this, they that, and all of a sudden the kids are all grown. and then they lose their job for whatever reason. And I've had wives that actually threaten their husbands that you either go to the VA to get yourself help, or I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And we, in our generation, your generation, we have to be mindful of all the vets we come across, is that there may be that hidden thing that hasn't exploded yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we see a lot. I mean, we've had Korean War vets, a lot of Vietnam vets that come, and it's like as soon as they retire, I mean, like you said, a lot of us, the military mindset, you get out, you throw yourself into work, you throw yourself into family, and you normally, a lot of the veterans or service members, they do very well in corporate setting because of their background. But the problem is once you retire and you don't have all those things going on at the same time, that's when you have all this time to think. And that's why it's a lot hard for a lot of us to sleep and stuff like that as well, because it's too quiet. When you don't have all these things going on at the same time, that's when you start thinking. And that's why a lot of Vietnam vets are starting to get help now that they're retiring. So,
and we try to help with that transition. Part of our program here is that we encourage people to join the veterans groups, because one, everyone's got, unfortunately or fortunately, we all have kind of the same mindset. Not even politics are involved, but we have the mindset that red, white, and blue, with here we go. And we hope that will be a way to give somebody an out. I tease my brother-in-law, he's telling me all this stuff I do, and I'm like, how many kids you got? And you're trying to tell me how to raise kids?
Mm-hmm.
But you got to have that mission that you have something to look forward to every day. Rick and I were both retired, and we're busier now than we were when we were working.
I hear that a lot. Yeah.
So
I wouldn't be busy. I'd be fishing all the time, but he keeps dragging me into things.
but it's good shit.
It's on your toes, man.
Yeah.
You don't want to lose that edge.
Yeah, that's what it is.
It's funny when I first tried to get some help through the VA, I found like this 6-month program that was doing cognitive behavioral therapy,
Oh, wow.
which helped me. It was like 2 or 3 times a week, and it was at Heinz, and so it was doing really well. And for the people out there that don't know what cognitive behavioral therapy is, it's basically you don't talk about what you went through, but you talk about how what you went through affects your day-to-day life now. So I actually thought I was doing pretty good. And but I didn't want to start with a one-on-one treatment, because the VA, the first thing they tried to do when I first tried to get help when I first got out was they did prolonged exposure, where they just recorded me saying the worst stuff that happened to me, and they made me listen to it over and over again, and then I would sit in my car and just lose my shit for an hour after each appointment, and I couldn't mentally handle that. So I gave up for a while, and then I found someone else that said, why don't we ease into it? Why don't we go through group therapy first? So I went to group therapy, and the first time I walked into a room, it was all Vietnam vets. I was the youngest person there. I was the only one from Iraq. And I was like, what the hell? I have nothing in common with these guys, because that's my mindset. And I think a lot of younger people have that same mindset, like you have nothing in common, but that's where you're wrong. It was weird because I stayed quiet, but then we weren't sharing war stories. They were just talking about everyday stuff. And they asked me, Mathias, when do you go shopping? So I was talking about grocery shopping. I said, I go like 1 o'clock in the morning. I know what I'm going to go in for. I go in and I leave. I see a lot of people nodding their heads, things like that. And I'm like, oh, we do have a lot in common, and I started to build on that. And that's when I got involved with the American Legion and the VFW. And now I'm the commander of the VFW in Crystal Lake, because we have so much in common. It doesn't matter what war you were in. Or even if you weren't in war. I mean, a lot of my American Legion brothers and sisters, like, they didn't serve overseas like that. But, I mean, you have so much in common. But I never saw that as a young buck coming out.
That's why, in my view, it's so important for a veteran to join a veterans organization, because of that like-minded mindset that Mike was talking about. Like, Jason can talk a story about what had happened over in Iraq, and he tells the same story to somebody sitting across the kitchen table, and they'll say, oh yeah, right, or it's too outlandish. But we listen to it and we can relate to it.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have to try to convince us whether or not it's true.
Right.
Unlike he can just share, and we all share alike.
Unless you're like a recon, special forces, sniper, or SEAL.
And they would know that it's bullshit.
Yeah, that
It's like 9 out of 10 of the vets that we run across every once in a while.
Yeah. They're always a sniper, and then always some other weird stuff too.
Well, it's so important for veterans to become part of a veterans organization simply because of that reason.
Right.
And when I know when I joined the Marine Corps League, first night I was there, I went, "Oh!" But I'm listening to everybody go back and forth, and something hit. You know, oh, I'm not the jackass that I thought I was. Then everybody,
Yeah, you are.
civilian,
No, you are, but everyone else is a jackass. Just like
they're
you, so
just
you're at
like I
home.
am. It was the same personality. Type of
Everybody's a
stuff.
prick here, so you feel right.
Yeah. So
And-
anyway, I felt at home for the very first time in like well over 20 years or so.
Yeah.
I felt at home, and it felt really good.
One thing that actually a couple different things. When I discovered this term called trauma bonding, I was like, wow, that's so genius. That's one of the things that I really, when I'm trying to help out a vet or talk to them, or when it comes to organizations in general and stuff, I try to refrain from just trauma bonding as having a bond between two people, and that's your main thing, because like you're just reliving that event over and over again. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not to say that I'm completely past all that stuff, because there's always going to be something that you're going to discover. But that's the wonderful thing about mindfulness is, you know, you're discovering certain things about yourself and triggers. But I try to refrain from trauma bonding for the basis of every part of my conversation, because I want people to know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and yes, you can be successful and stuff. And one of the reasons why I don't drink is that it really lowers a lot of that trauma bonding. And you know, we were brought up in an environment where, you know, drinking to freaking access and all that stuff, and I didn't realize we were drinking to actually numb a lot of the stress that's going on. Nothing wrong with it. People can do it responsibly, perfectly fine, but I couldn't do it. So I was like, yeah, I got to stop. But yeah, you know, you relate to the person with your experience and stories and all that stuff. But then I try to remain really solution orientated. So that's where like programs like Road Home Program, they give you all these tools. And I didn't go through that, but I went through the 6-week residential treatment program over at Level, over at North Chicago. And it was a good program, but
That's a VA center.
VA center. Yeah, it's a good program. You stay there, they house you, all that stuff. It's all free and stuff. But certain things I liked about it, certain things I didn't like about it, where, you know, if you're a clinician or you know, a professional over there, you keep politics out of it completely. So I'm like, yeah, I didn't really approve of, you know, bleeding in political viewpoints when it was one-on-one. It seems like Row at Home program, they don't do that, and that they really bring in a lot of holistic stuff. So like mindfulness, yoga, all that stuff. And, you know, doing something like that with a Vietnam vet or just any vet in general, you know, you're taught as a guy, like, oh, you don't do that sort of stuff. So, but you're taking that person out of their subconscious comfort zone and be like, yeah, you know, if it works, it works. But yeah, the whole mindfulness thing, you know, I was diagnosed with OCD before I got into the military, and like the legitimate one where, you know, if it's a mundane thing, but then your brain tricks you into think it's something important. If you don't do it or solve it, it's going to be a catastrophe, like it's a life-threatening situation. So like your fight or flight response kicks in when you're doing like an everyday task and stuff. So I had that, then, you know, the combat related stress stuff. But you know, it seems like that when you're doing programs like the Road Home, they ease you into it. You know, versus like what you were saying is that, you know, you write down your most horrendous experience. And I had that happen too when I was over at CBOC. And, you know, I get what they're trying to do, but like you should have some form of supervision, or if like you're at a, you know, residential treatment, if they're going to be doing things like that. Because like if you're mindful of something, it's like, all right, well, I have an emotional quotient that is behind something that's triggering me. And yeah, if I sit with it long enough, eventually my brain's going to, but you know, how long is that going to take where it starts diminishing? It could take weeks, days, months, years for that to happen. So, but you know, for me, that's, and now that I'm aware of like, if I sit with something, it's going to diminish eventually because I will have, you know, power over it. But it's probably best that you have trained professionals that are watching you while you're doing that type of stuff, or at least
when you mentioned about the road home, I in my what's in mind for me is like Wounded Warrior Project. Everybody on the planet knows about Wounded Warrior Project. Road home is not really talked about. It's not a household name. So I'm wondering about that. What got you? How did you become aware of this road home program? What got you into it? How did you get there?
Thank you. That's an awesome segue. So my my background, or what happened to me in order for me to work here. I was working at a local nonprofit that helped homeless veterans, and I was put in. So I was a VP at a bank, like I said, and then the executive director of this organization reached out to me via LinkedIn and said, "Would you ever consider working with veterans?" And I said, "Hell yeah!" So I left working at a bank to work huge pay cut because nonprofits fill your heart, not your pockets. But anyway, so I started working for this organization, and it was great. They kind of put me in to a case manager position where normally they would have like social workers or something like that. And my background's in nutrition, and then my master's was in business. And so I probably shouldn't have been in that type of position, but they liked that I was a combat vet and I could relate with the service members that I was meeting. But it ended up being real heavy. And like I said, when I got help originally, it was cognitive behavioral therapy. And so I thought I was doing good. I was doing okay mentally. And then when I worked at this organization, we had a handful of suicides in 1 year on my caseload. And then one of my buddies that I served in Iraq with took his own life. And so that was kind of like I guess the last straw for me. And so I reached out to the VA because that's all I knew. Even though I had regular insurance, I still did everything at the VA because I liked how I got treated. I liked going into the VA hospital. And I think the VA is fantastic in Illinois. I hear horror stories all over the US, but I feel like ours are pretty damn good.
I like levels pretty good.
And so I reached out to the VA because that's all I knew. And they were 2 months behind on an intake. And I think we all can agree when you're in a dark place, you don't have 2 months to wait.
No.
So I reached out to Ashton. Ashton was in my position.
Ashton Croner.
Yeah. And then she's, she was a lioness. She did 3 tours. She was, a certified badass. And so I reached out to her and said, I know you talked about road home program, but I don't know too much about it, but I need to talk to somebody now. I need help. And within an hour, I got an intake. By the next day, I got help.
That was fantastic.
So when they had an opening, I had to jump on board to help tell my brothers and sisters in arms. So that's where my story starts. I start working for Road Home Program, and one of the things we do is set up, resource tables at different organizations, different events. And so I went to, I think it was the first or second week I worked there. We went to an event, a military appreciation night at the Chicago Wolves game. And they said, it's a family event, bring your son. So my son was 4 and he loves riding on my shoulders. And even though my mom's like, don't you have a bad back? I'm like, I'll let him ride on my shoulders till he's 18 if he wants to. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. But I know there'll be a day he doesn't want to. But anyway, so he rides on my shoulders everywhere. So we were over there, we set up the table, and the person that runs the place said, hey, have you seen the opening number? And I said, no. He's like, we spend a lot of money on it. You need to bring your son in there to see it. So I bring my son in there. We get right up on the glass, and then the pyrotechnics start and the fireworks start going off. And I knew it was a huge trigger for me. So I just turned around and tried to leave. My son was like, Daddy, you want to watch it? Well, I'm a dad first. Like I said, with the mindfulness, we care about other people more. So I just braced against the wall and took it, and then, just grinned and bared it. When I walked back into like the area where a table was, Ashton saw my face and she's like, are you okay? And I was like, no. And so she got the attention away from me and started talking to my son on my shoulders. And I was lucky that my son never saw me lose my shit. And so I went to my therapist a couple of days later and said, I need to talk to you. I just had the worst panic attack I've had in 15 years, and my son was on my shoulders. And I told him, at that point in my life, I thought it was a good goal to have for my son never to see me break down. I thought that was a good goal. Now, after getting help, I know it's important for children to know that you have feelings and stuff like that. But at the time, I thought hiding it from my son and my family was like the best way to do it. So he said, he made a face and he was like, we'll talk about it next week. And I was like, I feel like we should talk about it now. And he's like, well, you need to figure out an age appropriate way to explain what you're going through to your son. So I took that home, and I love my therapist, and I took that home and I was like, how the hell do you talk to anybody about the worst time in your life, let alone a 4-year-old? How are you supposed to explain fear to somebody that's never experienced fear? Like, I don't think I experienced fear until I was 19 when I crossed over into Iraq. So trying to figure out a palatable way to explain what you're going through to your son or to anybody was a task. So I reached out to my buddy Nick Atchison is the illustrator, and he's got 5 kids and he's an amazing artist. And I said, I know you haven't done a children's book before, but would you, I sent him the information and he said, yeah, I want to be part of this. So we ended up making the book, and this was supposed to just be for my son. I think for people that have PTSD, I feel like this is a normal comment, but for people that don't, maybe they don't understand. But, when you have PTSD, I feel like it's a normal feeling to feel like you're not going to live an extremely long life. And so I wanted something tangible that my son could have that showed that I loved him. And so when we made it and it was done, some people started to see it and they were like, you need to put this out for other people. And so I figured out how to put it self-publish and
This is your book here.
Yeah, Instead of Sheep, a soldier's way of explaining PTSD to his son.
Yes.
So basically, there was no books out there because I wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel at all. I wasn't trying to write a book. I did not want to write a book whatsoever. All I wanted was something that would allow me to have that conversation with my son, and there's nothing out there. There's one book, and it's a good book, but it just didn't apply to me. It's called Why Is Daddy So Mad? And it just said, Daddy yelled at me because I didn't eat my food. Daddy yelled at me because I didn't clean my room. And although it may be true that Daddy's kind of a jerk because he has PTSD, it really didn't shine any light on what it is. So with my background in nutrition, there are a lot of books that are like, eat this, not that, right? So I try to do it like that. Like when you see fireworks, you see this. When I see fireworks, I see this. Trying to explain it the best way I could to my son. And some of them, I think there's one page that has a picture of the war-torn veteran looking in the mirror. He's a bear, and he sees himself, as a service member, like in it shows here. Let me show you. I think this is relatable to a lot of parents in general. But, it says sometimes Daddy doesn't see himself the way you do. Daddy might not feel good about the things he's been through, and no matter how we see ourselves as like a failure or what have you, our children always see us as a superhero. Right. And so that one is pretty impactful for me. And so I ended up making the book. I also got the SGB shot. Are you guys familiar with the SGB shot?
I've heard of it, but tell us about that.
So the SGB shot, and Rush is actually doing a study on it as well. So if anybody's interested in it as well, they can get the shot. For anybody that's gone through trauma, basically what it is Dr. Lipov out of Oak Brook, he would administer the shot. It's 2 shots of anesthesia in your vagus nerve that attaches to your amygdala, the fight, flight, or freeze in your brain. And so he would do it, and it's for body pain. And they've been doing it since World War II. And then one time somebody came in to get this shot for body pain, but he also had severe social anxiety and sweaty palms. And when he got the shot done, that stuff went away. So then Dr. Lipov started doing all this research, I think back in 2008, somewhere around there. And now he flies around the country and teaches other doctors how to administer this shot for first responders and for service members that have gone through severe trauma. And I asked him to dumb it down because I supposedly it like shrinks the amygdala, all this. I'm like, I'm a dumb soldier. What does it mean? And he said it gives you an extra second in your brain to rationalize before you react. And it's weird because my dad picked me up. It's a 15-minute procedure. It was nothing. And I think the worst thing that can happen is you can have a droopy face on the side that they give you the shot, and then only lasts like an hour or so. But mine didn't do that. I chewed some ice. As soon as I could chew ice, I left. And my dad picked me up, and I knew I had like this weird, silly grin on my face for some reason, just like, you know. And my dad was like, "How do you feel?" And the only way I can explain it was calm. You know, I didn't feel calm for 15 years.
Wow.
And so I felt calm. And, you know,
that lack of calm was norm.
So I would say all the time I would sit at about an 8. So anything that happened and I would boil over, you know, it was easy. You know, I went from an 8 to a 10, and then I went back to an 8, and then I'll be like, what? I said I'm sorry. You know, like, what's the deal? You know, it's not a big deal. I said I'm sorry. You know, but now I'm sitting at a 10 or at a 2. So now when I blow up, it's a huge deal. And I'm like, holy shit, I need to reevaluate what I'm going through. And so the SGB shot just, I feel like, gives you an opportunity to reset your brain a little bit. And so what ended up happening is 2 days after I got this done, right before 4th of July. And, you know, I live in Cary down by the river, so they blow off quarter sticks of dynamite, you know, and that's normal for like 2 months. So it didn't bother me at all. And driving to Chicago didn't bother me. Normally I want to murder at least 3 people on the road. And so basically what it did was allow me to get deeper into my therapy. So I walked into my therapist and I said, I want to talk about my trauma. And that was the first time I said I wanted to talk about my trauma in 19 years. So it took me 19 years to actually talk about my trauma for the first time. Like, I always talked about how it affected me, but I never actually talked about what happened in order for me to feel the way that I do. And I didn't understand that, like, intrusive thoughts and nightmares, that stuff just happens because you never actually work on what you experience. You just push it down. You know, like a cut on your arm, you know, your body heals it. You know, if you have PTSD, your body keeps bringing it up because you never work on it. So I had to work on it in order for it to help. So I'm doing a lot better now, and my life's completely different because of these steps. And it's not an end all be all. Our program at Road Home program, they say without any follow-up is good for about a year. Same with the SGB shot. You're good for about a year if you don't do anything else. But the thing is, you use these opportunities to bring down your barriers a little bit, to do the homework, you know, and you want to get what you put in, right? You get out what you put in. So I got all these extra tools. So then when it does wear off, I have these tools to help regulate so that I don't have these huge outbursts, and, you know, I'm not affecting my family so much and things like that.
Are you suggesting that the therapy that you're administered to, that's an ongoing thing probably for the rest of your life? Are you
cognitive processing therapy? I mean, I think there's, it never goes away, but I think it's more so now, kind of just keeping up with the care. It's not something that, I mean, I think it's beneficial for anybody to talk to somebody,
right? For sure.
It's good to just have somebody that's an active listener that's just going to listen to you complain about your life. You know, I think that's important. So I think I'll always do therapy, but I don't think I need to go specifically to tackle my demons as much as I did before I started getting that CPT, the cognitive processing therapy help.
Right on.
You know, a couple of things that comes up is that as lay persons or people that haven't been in combat, it's like, if I turn around and say, Jason, you need to go to see the VA for your PTSD. Well, what's the first thing you do? Put up a barrier and say no, you know, and you get somebody that don't know what they're talking.
Right.
But the thing is to encourage people that when they get to the point where hey, I need to go get help, now they're ready to accept treatment. But if you try to push them in the treatment, they're going to say no. It's just, you know, one of the things we've discussed in the past is that there's always people that you got to do this horse therapy. You got to have a dog. You got to have that. Well, time out. We're not certified to say Jason needs to have a dog or a horse. A dog or a horse may scare the crap out of them. Yeah. But we got people that are out there, our peers in the veteran community, that are trying to push certain things. There's a lot of stuff out there. And not all the VAs are doing the same programs. You know, you got the Road Home programs, got one, and I know the Chicago Marines, they try to fund the shot for that stuff. There's a lot of things that are out there. All you
Is
can
this
do
the
is
same shot that Mr. Zog was talking about?
Yeah.
It's the same one.
And
Wow.
the VA actually supports it now. The VA supports
Yeah.
SGB shot. If you talk to your counselor, you can get funded by the VA for it as well.
Wow.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You want to get shots together?
Shots.
Let's do it.
shots.
That used to mean something totally different.
Well, I mean, we could get that afterwards too.
Well, and like they used to have an organization called the Heart and Brain Foundation, and because the VA takes like 5 years to do anything new, they turn around and their son was killed in Iraq at Fallujah when that happened, and they were in turmoil, but they created this foundation, and what they did was they had come up with these computer software to help with the TBI part. It was with the VA, we turn around and say, well, here's a computer, you can use it for an hour. Well, they're like, hell no. You get the computer and you get to keep it and use it as much as you want to help rewire the brain from the TBI part.
Sure.
So, but there's so many different programs out there, but we as lay people
Right.
shouldn't be pushing this or that to say, hey, there's all kinds of stuff out there. We just have to find what works for you.
What
Yeah.
sounds really credible about the Road Home Project is the holistic nature of it, of the entire program. And you're talking yoga, you're talking, cognitive therapy, you're talking a broad range, including medical with a shot. It's such a very broad range of stuff that's going to probably, and I think in a general sense, probably increase the likelihood of benefit.
Yeah.
But the big thing is that at the end of their program, they have the graduation period, and they provide the residents or clients or whatever, the fellow veterans, and they'll get a chance to turn around and spend a few minutes to talk about what the program meant and did for them.
Right.
And a lot of people don't stuff that it's coming from the people.
I mean,
Do you have any
outpatient treatment.
percentages?
I was about to say, yeah,
Okay.
outpatient treatment, just normal outpatient treatment. You have more, around 50% dropout rate. I mean, I'm
Oh, wow.
I'm one of them. I drop out every once in a while, then go back in. I mean, this is how I used to do it. But Road Home program, I mean, you're talking about high 90s of completion. And the ones that don't complete, it's normally because they have to leave to do something with their family, like a family emergency or something. And
you're there too. So
it's not inpatient. That's the thing. It's not inpatient. So you have the rest of the night. So it's like an 8 to 4 sort of scenario. And then at the rest of the night, you can build that camaraderie with your other cohorts, and they end up being friends and having like a text chain and all that stuff. And they have the weekends off. We normally send them to the museum if they want to go and things like that. But it definitely, the last thing I wanted to say about the Road Home program is, they realized that, vets or active duty do not want to be in a medical setting, right? You don't want to go to a hospital. So this does not look like the hospital. If you guys ever have a chance to go do a tour, it's awesome. And it looks more like a spa. I mean, you're walking to a building that's not labeled. It's a Teamster building, actually. And so the second floor, for the Teamsters building is our floor. And
Is that the Bolingbrook area?
No, it's downtown Chicago.
No,
It's
downtown.
across the street from the actual Rush building,
Okay.
across 290. But I mean, anyway, so the doctors don't wear lab coats. They just wear like polos or whatever. And it's just a very relaxed situation where everything is thought about. They have white air or white noise pumping through the ceilings. The walls are painted to look like a sunrise. I mean, everything was thought out.
Wow. That's pretty fantastic.
no.
Truly. Do you have anything else you wish to add regarding this?
Well, for the book, just so you guys know, I mean, we're working on a couple more that are going to age up the characters and talk about more pressing stuff. Get away from the rhyming and talk about where moral injury. Talk about survivor's guilt. Talk about how certain times of the year bother us. Because I know personally, I'll be moody and then I look at the calendar and be like, "That's why."
Right.
And without even looking at the calendar, you just have these feelings. Stuff like that. So we're going to age up the characters, talk about other things. My goal is to continue to make these so that I have that platform to continue that conversation with my son while he gets older. And hopefully one day I'll be able to sit him down as a young adult and kind of tell him what happened.
How can we get the word out? I mean, other than what we're doing right now, how can we get the word out about the Rush Home program?
Yeah, Road Home program. You mean it's roadhomeprogram.org. And then you guys shared the link. And then it's 312-942-8387. That's 312-942-VETS.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you guys very much for having me on. I really
thanks
appreciate it.
Appreciate you being here.
Yeah,
Truly.
thanks for being here. Definitely very enlightening what you had to say. So we are going to wrap it up now. But again, I want to thank our guest, Mathias Carter, for coming out. If you like what you heard, please like us on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification. The like button helps out with the algorithms, and then the bell notification will let you know of any future notifications. Also, check us out on Twitch, Twitter, Apple, Spotify. I think I covered them all. And want to thank our producer, Tim Stewart, over at 216 The Net.
When our next show, it's a must see. We have a guest speaker, Juan Martinez, is going to be here, who experienced something that we can all completely appreciate as veterans and as Americans in general. Our next show is going to be on October the 19th, but the date that we're talking about is October the 23rd, 1983, when the Marine barracks at the airport in Beirut, Lebanon, was blown to pieces by a truck bomb, killing several Americans. And Mr. Martinez was there, and he's going to share us that experience. And what's interesting, he's got a lot to say about the program because it helped him to be able to talk about this. And recently, I contacted somebody just to let you know about, hey, can you help us out here, because he was there, and he said, no, I can't even talk about it. Don't want anything to do with it. But we found Mr. Martinez. He's willing to talk about it, and it's going to be a phenomenal program. He's got a lot to say. Very fascinating. But I hope to see you guys there.
We want to thank the viewers and listeners for joining us today. We hope that you enjoyed and learned a lot on our mission to provide service to fellow veterans. We want to encourage all veterans to join a veterans organization in your area. You can come home. You know, we got the American Legion, VFW, AMVETS, Polish Legion, Navy Reserve, Fleet Reserve Association, the Navy League. We got the Marine Corps League for all the Marines. To get together and one, give you a mission. One is help other families and vets in the community, but help each other. We'll see you on the 19th of October.
Awesome. Thank you, folks.